All right, so Renee, can you introduce our next guest?
Thanks, Julia. Right now I'm thrilled to welcome Tina Hester. Tina Hester is the executive director of Jane's Due Process. She worked with Jane Doe and many other Janes on their abortion cases. Welcome, Tina.
Oh, thank you for having me, Renee and Julia. Appreciate it. And thank you for Advocates for hosting yet another wonderful Speak Out.
Great. Tina, thanks so much for joining us. Do you want to go ahead and share your story as you're ready?
Sure. Well, I was first going to talk a little bit about Jane's Due Process, if that's okay, and then end up with my story, or would you prefer for me to start with my own personal story?
Go ahead with how you prefer to tell us a little bit about Jane's Due Process.
Okay. So Jane's Due Process is a legal services group here in Texas. We're a pioneer in offering legal services for pregnant teens, particularly when they want to terminate a pregnancy and can't involve or find a parent. We were started when then Governor George W. Bush, Texas, he was the Texas governor before he was president. He signed into law a requirement that young women get a parental notification. They would have to inform a parent before seeking abortion care. And a group of attorneys realized that these young women it was hard to navigate in the court system here in Texas. And so they got together and started a Jane's Due Process. Since then, we've been slogging along for the last 16, 17 years. For many years, we were kind of quiet about what we did, but back in 2015, the state legislature went after our Janes, and so we've been much more public about our work. We have a legal hotline, a 24/7 legal hotline that is staffed or volunteered, staffed mostly by volunteers. Many of them are in law school, and some of them are retired attorneys, and others just want to be able to be online and help a Jane in her time of need. We also have a text hotline, which has gone really well, and obviously, we have a 3-person staff for the whole state of Texas and a part-time legal advisor. So obviously, we rely heavily on our volunteer referrals, our referral attorneys across the state. So that's kind of a background about Jane's, and I thought I'd talk a little bit about what it's like to seek a judicial bypass, because in Texas, as in 36 other states, you have to either notify a parent or you have to get parental consent. Or in some cases, like Texas, we like to do it big here, you have to have both. And to run the gauntlet to get a judicial bypass is pretty, difficult. And I can't even tell you how many Janes I have spoken to over the years, probably thousands. And most of them are so brave and so on top of things that for them to even go to court is pretty amazing. Do y'all have any questions about the judicial bypass process?
Yeah, I wanted to ask you, what makes the laws around abortion and minors so burdensome? Okay.
Well, in Texas, it's one of the worst states in the country to seek a judicial bypass. In Texas, there are venue restrictions. You have to file the application in your home county. And so that's really difficult because in a lot of home counties, people are going to know people at the courthouse. They have the caveat in Texas that if you have a county with less than 10,000 people, that you can apply in a neighboring county or the county where you're going to seek abortion care. But 10,000 people is, anything like, let's say you have 11,000 people in your county, everybody in that county knows your business. I mean, it is really difficult to remain confidential, have a confidential proceeding in a county that size. And we usually kind of joke here that there's usually more livestock than people in counties of that size. So in Texas, what you have to do is you'd be assigned, or we would assign you, we would find you an attorney ad litem and possibly a guardian ad litem. And you'd meet with them, make sure that you have a good case, that you're clear on your decision, that we'd also ask you to go to a clinic, which are, very hard to find in Texas, and have a sonogram and pregnancy options counseling, because we consider that part of being prepared to go to court. And then you have to go in, usually, in a courtroom with a total stranger, usually an older man, and describe your sex life and why you can't involve a parent in this decision. And so those are, just sort of the basic problems. And then in Texas, in addition to that, we have the new law that was passed in 2015 allows judges just to sit on the case. So they file the application, 5 days goes, the judge doesn't hear the case. Before, it was considered deemed granted, so the minor could move on and seek the abortion care. And now in Texas, it's deemed denied. So this Jane doesn't even have her day in court. She can't build a record. She can't appeal it. It's blatantly unconstitutional. The other big hurdle in Texas is just how darn big we are, because the sheer size makes a huge difference. That the TexPAT did an excellent story that was prepared, ready for HB2, the law that struck down Texas restrictive abortion law, that showed that women were having to travel hundreds of miles to access care. And we have 7 counties, that have a clinic that offer abortion care, and we have 254 counties. So you can imagine how the distance that our Janes are having to travel. And transportation is difficult for anybody, but think of you're a Jane, you have no car, let's say you're already a parent, you're trying to get out of an abusive household to seek the abortion care that you need. I mean, those are huge hurdles, and that's what we're dealing with our Janes daily.
And can you also tell us a little bit about the Jane Doe cases?
Sure, I'm happy to. I know Bridget Amiri is going to be on later in this in the 1 and 3 Speakout, and she has been, the lead attorney. The ACLU has done. Bridget Amiri and her team at the ACLU have been remarkable. So they can tell you a little bit more about the machinations of the case and where things stand and where what's going on in the court. I can tell you a little bit more about the Jane and. So this Jane Doe crossed into the United States in mid-September of last year. She was fleeing a very abusive household and a gang-ridden neighborhood in a Central American country. Her parents had beat her older sister so severely when she became pregnant that the older sister miscarried. So Jane had every reason not to involve her parents in this decision. So she crossed over, turned herself into the federal agents, was assigned to go to a shelter for unaccompanied minors because she was 17. And so in that case, it's run, the Office of Refugee Relocation runs that program, and that's under the Department of Health and Human Services. So she takes a pregnancy test when she's there and realizes she's pregnant. And asked to seek abortion care. And for weeks, she didn't get the services she needed. She was assigned a district court in South Texas, assigned an attorney ad litem and a guardian ad litem to represent her in court. She was able to get that judicial bypass, like all the other young women that we work with. She followed the rules, went through the right court process. And then the federal government put up this huge roadblock. They sat on her case. They wouldn't let her go to 2 different appointments at the clinic. They took her to a crisis pregnancy center, as you mentioned. They had people praying over her. They did an unnecessary exam. It was just such blatant government overreach that it's hard. It's like, as we mentioned, it's kind of just like a dystopian world that you're stuck someplace that you can't access the care you need.
Thank you. And can you also tell us, why do you think it's important to advocate for minors who need abortion care?
Well, I think everybody should be able to choose their future, and minors included. No one should be forced to be a parent against their wishes. No one should have to make this Hobbesian choice that Jane Doe was forced to make either. The government said to her, well, you're free to leave. You can go back to your crime-ridden, abusive household, crime-ridden country, abusive household, or you can have this baby. She had to make this choice. No one should be forced to make that kind of choice. Everyone should have the same rights. And Janes who don't want to be a parent and don't have a support system have a very difficult time. It's shown over and over that Janes who have an unplanned pregnancy and unwanted pregnancy and don't have a support system are much less likely to graduate from high school. One of the top reasons that teens drop out of high school is because of an unplanned pregnancy. And their children are more likely to be teen parents as well, and may not have the opportunities that a lot of us had to graduate from high school and college. So it's not saying that you can't, it's just more difficult in most situations, particularly if you don't want to be pregnant. So that's why we would say, why Jane's due process and many other advocates work around the clock trying to guarantee that young people have the same rights as adult women.
Okay. What have I got down? And Tina, would you also like to share your story?
Sure. I would like to basically, it sounds like a SAT exam, compare and contrast, right? But I had an abortion when I was in my 20s. I was living in Washington, D.C., and had an unplanned pregnancy. And I would like to show what that was like compared to what our Janes have to go through. And, many women, not just minors, have to go through. So I was able to go to my local private doctor, my OBGYN, and in Texas and most other places, women, Janes in particular, because they may not have a relationship with a private OBGYN, would have to go to an abortion clinic, which are usually in Texas, hundreds of miles away. Mainly because private physicians here in Texas do not want to are intimidated by the anti-choice zealots. And so they're unwilling to do abortions in their own private practices. My insurance covered my visit and my follow-up visit. In Texas and in other states, they've now passed laws that require women who think they might have an abortion in the future to go out and buy a separate insurance policy or rider so that they can have an abortion, basically forcing women to pay out of pocket for what should be normal health care. I didn't have to go a great distance. I went, I think, like 5 blocks from my work over to where my private physician worked, had his practice. I took a trusted friend with me. We didn't have to go through a gauntlet of anti-choice screaming, looking at awful posters. It was a very calm experience. The staff was great. And so that just kind of shows you, as Deborah was saying, from a position of privilege, that I had this non-eventful, experience for me. And a lot of our Janes are completely traumatized, or they'll have vans. Several places in the States have a van set up across the street from an abortion provider, and Janes are panicky. This is an unexpected event. They end up going because it'll say, free sonogram, come here, and they'll go into that van and have a sonogram, which we don't even know if it's calibrated correctly. Oftentimes it's not. And they'll be told basically that, they're misled thinking that they're in the abortion clinic when they're actually in a crisis pregnancy center that has a van out front. One of these crisis pregnancy center vans even has the same outfits and colors that is used by the abortion clinic across the street, totally trying to mislead these young women. So that's my experience. I have since had a child and then 3 miscarriages, and I can tell you completely what was more devastating to me was having a miscarriage for a very wanted pregnancy than seeking an abortion. After my abortion, all I felt was relief and gratitude that there are people out there working on our behalf, particularly, now that I've worked in the pro-choice community for many years, the fact that these fierce litigators have provided this, safe haven for those women who choose to terminate a pregnancy, including me.
Mm-hmm. Yes. Thank you again, Tina, for being here. Thank you for sharing your story, and thank you for all the work that you're doing with the Janes.
And let me just say, if you're interested in how to help Jane or this Jane Doe, obviously you spoke eloquently about why we need to get rid of Scott Lloyd. I would highly suggest you call your congressperson and suggest that he get the pink slip, as you mentioned. I think it's incredibly creepy that this guy is traveling to facilities and trying to talk young women out of having abortions. Now, that's just really beyond the pale. And I hope that your listeners and viewers will, take up the action that you have suggested. And if you're interested, I'm going to have a little fun here. If you're interested in winning this little uterus, you can go to our website, Jane's Due Process, and sign up to either read our blog or make a small donation. Anybody who does that during the Speakout or anytime on Tuesday, we'll put you in a raffle, and you might get your own stuffed plush uterus. So sometimes we have to have a little fun in this movement as well.
Yes. Okay. Awesome. Thank you so much, Tina. It was so nice speaking with you.
Sure. Yeah, thank you. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.